from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Thursday night edition of the program. If you want to join the conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And plenty to discuss today. The news doesn't stop. There's a bunch of domestic stuff I want to get into because there's obviously the impending speaker debacle. We're going to tackle that at the bottom of the hour. But I want to get into a couple of other things because Hunter Biden obviously pleaded not guilty to his gun charge, which, again, the gun charge was that he possessed a gun that they know was thrown into the garbage can outside of a convenience store or a deli. Now he didn't do anything wrong, right? Even though he admitted to being an addict at the time and lying on these federal documents is part and parcel of being an addict and applying for the gun. Apparently, he says he's not guilty of that, and now today he's asking a judge to dismiss the case. I think that's pretty interesting. I guess that's part and parcel, right, of the defense process and whatnot. But his lawyer, Abby Lowell, told Magistrate Judge Christopher Burke that he will file a motion to dismiss the gun case because he believes that the July sweetheart plea deal remains in effect and that the gun statute is unconstitutional. The president's son is charged with one count of false statements in the purchase of a firearm and one count of possession of a firearm by a person who is an unlawful user or addicted to a controlled substance, and one count of a false statement related to information required to be kept by a federal firearms licensed dealer. Now, Hunter Biden's sweetheart plea deal with the special counsel David Weiss collapsed after U.S. District Judge Mary Ellen Norica questioned if the plea deal covered future potential charges of the Justice Department's ongoing investigation. The prosecution said the deal did not include any alleged FARA violations, Foreign Agents Registration Act. So Weiss and Hunter Biden's disagreement on the plea deal caused Weiss to withdraw the agreement and later charge Hunter Biden with 3 gun violations, which he did after he himself was elevated to special counsel. And they just had a few days ago, they added somebody to the special counsel's office, another former Biden ally. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Now, Weiss could still bring the potential tax charges against the president's son, but we don't know what's going on with that. So that's the story with Hunter Biden. And it just makes me think, if you were the son of a president, many people think, well, he's the son of a president. He's going to get off regardless. That's what happens. The problem with this is if you were the son of a president and your name was Donald Trump Jr., do you think you'd get off or do you think they'd throw the book at you? Right. So it's not really the question of if you're the son of the president. It's the question of, are you the son of a president they like or a president they dislike? And once we start throwing the rule book out the window and treating people differently because we don't like their politics, obviously, that's where we get into the mess that we're in. So I know I'm preaching to the choir on this one, but I just think it's fascinating. Now, of course, last week we discussed with one of our callers, Doc, who brought this up. Hang on a second. There we go. The foam thing on my microphone was loose. So the idea of this man running away from the country. And who I'm talking about is Elvis Chan, who was supposed to appear on September 21st before Jim Jordan's Judiciary Committee and said, well, I'm out of the country on FBI business. I can't be there right now. He was scheduled to appear today, and he did not show up. So, maybe the caller was right. Maybe this guy's on the run. Who knows? I didn't think that was going to be the case, but it looks like he's dodging Jim Jordan. Now, Elvis Chan, who appeared to lie under oath about his role in censoring Hunter Biden and the laptop story, failed to show up today for his scheduled testimony, and the Judiciary Committee had subpoenaed him, like I said, a week and a half ago. Chan is now nowhere to be found at the time of the interview, And this is according to the Daily Caller. And according to Russell Dye, who's Jim Jordan's chief of staff, he says everything's on the table for Mr. Chan, including contempt. So we'll see what happens. Now, we know if you're held in contempt and you are of one party, you just laugh it off. If you're held in contempt and you're with another party, you get leg irons, shackles, everything, you name it, they put you in the tombs. So it's interesting. Now, Chan's testimony was initially expected to take place on September 15th until a dispute between the committee and the DOJ resulted in Chan's interview falling through. So now the Judiciary Committee sent an initial subpoena for Chan to testify, and of course, that's failed as well. So I don't know where we stand with Elvis Chan. Maybe the caller who was right. I don't know if it was Doc or somebody else who called in on that one. And I said, I think he's going to show up. Perhaps I've given too much of a benefit of the doubt to Elvis Chan. What does Elvis Chan, when did he know it? Where is Elvis Chan? I have no idea. But that's what's going on with that. Then we have some other news. Let me see here. What's the next story I wanted to talk about? Hold on a second. I'm going faster than my brain can move. All right. This is funny. We'll do that one in a little bit. That's funny. That's not so funny. I want to talk about Jim Jordan. Now, Jim Jordan, you know, he's announced this run for speaker. And I think he's got the best shot of winning. He seems to have a tremendous amount of support. There's a piece in the Washington Examiner indicating what Jordan thinks it would look like if he becomes Speaker of the House. And I think that's pretty interesting. According to the piece, it says the Ohio Republican painted a picture of what a Jordan speakership would look like, outlining his plan to avoid a government shutdown, resolving disputes within his Republican conference, and what policies he would focus on, and where the multiple investigations that are currently going on would stand if he departed from the chairman role. Now, I don't know. One of the things he said this morning on Fox News was, I think the first thing you do is you pass the bipartisan bill that's in the Senate. We take up that bill here in the House and we pass it. It's a no shutdown act. Jordan referred to the bipartisan bill introduced by Senators Lankford and Hassan as the Prevent Government Shutdowns Act, requiring all members of Congress to continue working if appropriations aren't passed on time. If funds do run out, an automatic continuing resolution would be enacted on a rolling 14-day period, and those would go back to back until they get something figured out. Again, I'd love to hear about a budget being approved, but I see this as a step in the right direction, but one I think that doesn't go far enough. But again, he's there and I'm not. So I'm guessing he figures if we go for trying to pass a budget, which we haven't done in a million years, this is probably the next best step that he believes he can pull off. And one thing I know about Jim Jordan, A, he's a fighter, and B, he's got a lot of friends on the Hill. And a lot of people in the Republican conference like him. I'm not saying everybody likes him, but a lot of people like him. And to me, I think he's probably got the best shot. So we'll see how that goes. He continued and say this would take the whole shutdown politics, shutdown scenario, shutdown stuff off the table. You do that, and then you focus on the legislation. And frankly, if we need some kind of continuing resolution or some stopgap measure, I think it would go all the way in the next year. I agree. It's an optimistic view. I hope it works. It's definitely better than the way we've been doing it. He continued to say that the way the debt ceiling was done, if you do a spending bill into the next year, there's an automatic cut that kicks in, and that's an incentive for us to get our work done and focus on the policies we want for these 12 appropriation bills. So it sounds like a plan. We're going to work on inviting Jim Jordan on the program so he can explain this a little bit better. Also have some invitations out to other members of Congress because I want to get different perspectives on what's going on so that we can keep everybody up to speed on what's happening. So we're going to continue to monitor this stuff. We're going to continue this discussion. Of course, I'm looking forward to your calls. We're going to be taking your calls all night. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Matt Gaetz just got schooled by AOC and others. He was totally manipulated into doing this. There were 8 so-called Republicans that got together with 208 Democrats to oust the Republican speaker. I mean, I can't believe he's that stupid to be used to being manipulated by AOC and others to create this outcome.
That was Congressman Garrett Graves, Republican from Louisiana, who is a right-hand man to Kevin McCarthy. He said, quote, Matt Gaetz just got schooled by AOC, all out crazy, my least favorite congressman from the Bronx and Queens. And he says he was totally manipulated into doing this. There were 8 so-called Republicans that got together with 208 Democrats to oust the Republican speaker. Now, I don't know Mr. Graves. He's welcome to come on the show if he'd like to discuss this. All I could say is I hear the criticism, and I haven't really responded or opined on it myself, because I see why people could set this up and say that, you know, AOC and Matt Gaetz came up with this plan to get rid of McCarthy. However, what benefit does AOC have in getting rid of McCarthy? Would AOC prefer Jim Jordan as Speaker, or would she prefer Kevin McCarthy? My point exactly. So I feel like this is just a little bit of rhetoric. It's very heated. There's a lot of guys that are out to get Matt Gaetz. They want to expel him. They want to do this. They want to do that. And it's interesting. There's a piece in The Hill says GOP aims fire at Gaetz after the McCarthy ouster. House Republicans are aiming their fire at Rep. Matt Gaetz after the congressman staged a successful effort to oust Kevin McCarthy, sharply criticizing him for teaming up with Democrats to boot out the speaker, and hurling a lot of personal insults his way as it went down. Now, taking matters a step further, 2 Republicans have said Gaetz should be kicked out of the House Republican Conference. The Hill mentions that this is an unlikely outcome. I would agree with that. I think Matt Gaetz has a fair amount of allies that are not going to sit there and vote. I'm sure some people want to get rid of him. I do get that. And I know there's a lot of people that were upset with him, in particular over timing. I get that too. But I think at the end of the day, if you get a Jim Jordan, and if Gaetz says, hey, McCarthy, I will vote for you, but I want a single member to be able to put a motion to vacate. And if you don't do this, then I'm going to file the motion to vacate. And McCarthy did went against what he said he would do. And according to their deal, and Gaetz said he would do what he said he would do, according to their deal. And I can't be mad at that. I really can't. As much as I like both of those guys. I think they're both terrific, honestly. But anyway, so they want to kick out Gaetz. Now, the amped-up rhetoric comes as the House GOP is being forced back to square one to elect a new speaker. Although I don't feel like they're back at square one, because I think Jim Jordan was a favorite even then. And he said, I'm with Kevin McCarthy. So I get that. Now that Jim Jordan has thrown his hat in the ring, I think a lot of people are going to back him up. Whether or not he gets the 218 he needs is a different story. And I think he'll eventually get it, even if it's on a subsequent vote. I don't think that it's going to that there's going to be major opposition. It's not like we have what's his name, Adam Kinzinger or Liz Cheney to where we have to count on a vote. But there are others that I'm sure aren't very, very happy with him, with Jordan, because they're maybe not as conservative, or don't appreciate, his direct approach or whatever it is. There's always a liberal or moderate Republican somewhere that you have to kind of cajole. And it is what it is. And again, now you have Garrett Graves coming out saying that McCarthy should have stayed in place and that Gaetz was working with AOC. Now, listen, Gaetz has worked with AOC in the past. I'm not against bipartisanship. I think it's just got to make sense. And again, when you look at something like this, yes, it looks like you got a handful of disgruntled Republicans to get together with all the Democrats to oust the Republican speaker. And it is, in my opinion, a bad look politically. But is it a bad move politically? This is the part that's debatable. And I think we only know when we get another speaker. I mean, this could be a black eye that they're going to use for us later on and say, look, these guys can't get their ducks in a row. They're killing each other. There's a civil war amongst Republicans. How could we elect somebody like that? That's truly the party of Trump, the party that doesn't know what's going on. They're just as crazy as he is. Maybe we should put them all in jail. Right? I could see an ad, a commercial kind of like that. But ultimately, The Graves commentary finishes with this. I can't believe he's that stupid to be used, to be manipulated by AOC and others to create this outcome. That sounds like a political statement, but again, his opinion, and I respect it. But now, two other congressmen, Republicans, by the way, Anthony D'Esposito and from New York, and let's see, who's the other one here? Let me see. Well, he'll come up in a second. But either way, both of these guys, they're saying that this is an act of heresy, and D'Esposito says he's literally taken one of our oldest institutions and put it on a downward spiral all over selfish needs. Now, I could understand somebody being mad at a single congressman for doing something selfishly, for doing something for self-preservation, for doing something to grandstand, for doing something over a personal vendetta. I can totally understand that. However, I don't know that that's the case here, right? There's all sorts of opinions going on. And even if that was an ulterior motive, I think that there was enough of the facts on the table where they were very public in their deal. And they said, look, here's the deal that we're ironing out. And Congressman Ronnie Jackson said it last night, and he voted for McCarthy. But he said, I believe that Kevin McCarthy's days were numbered because of the moves that he was making. When you move a certain way, people are going to look at you a certain way. And I get that. I get that. As much as I like the guy and I think he's effective at, reaching across the aisle and doing what needs to be done, I realize sometimes that is a problem. I get it. I'm a very fair guy. I try to be very fair. I'm not here to torch everybody down to the ground. Sometimes I am, but I realize I worked for a congressman many years ago, Congressman Scott Garrett, and I learned a lot about how things work. And I don't believe you can survive without the collegiality that goes with working with everybody. Even like this radio show. This is why I allow people that disagree with me to get right to the front every time they call, and I put them on the air and I give them time, and I try not to cut them off because I want to hear what the other side has to say, because ultimately the other side is my daughter's school teacher. The other side is the person making me coffee in the morning. The other side is somebody pumping my gas, because I might get gas in Jersey where somebody else has to pump your gas. Only state in America where somebody else pumps your gas. And my point is, we must coexist. I can't live in a world where I'm gonna up and move to a very conservative red county. God bless you if you've done it. Good for you. Not in the cards for me. I'm a New Yorker stuck in New Jersey, and this is one of the bluest places ever. If I want to go on a date, trust me, she's a liberal, right? It's super hard to find a conservative girl around here. So my point is, we all live in different circumstances, and we have to coexist. So I understand getting along with people. I also understand sticking by your principles, not bending in the face of an adversary. And it's in my opinion, it's a balancing act, is all it is. Now, of course, you have to stick to your guns and have principle and provide contrast and, gain public opinion so that we can have a smaller government, so that we can have a more robust economy, so that we don't have so much spending, so that it's harder to push the pork barrel spending. Absolutely. All of that has to be done. But we're going to get to the bottom of this, because straight ahead, Congressman Matt Gaetz, I can't talk today. Matt Gaetz is joining us next. You don't want to miss it. He goes one-on-one with me, and we're going to talk about everything. Did he make a mistake? Does he regret it? You're going to hear it from him straight ahead. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere. Don't move a muscle. It's Rich Valdez, and we're coming right back.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Why do you think Jim Jordan's in the catbird seat?
Because it's all about, I think if it was secret ballot, Steve Scalise would win overwhelmingly, or anybody but Jim Jordan. But what you're going to start seeing, Anderson, is on the emails, on the fundraising, on other cable news networks, Jim is going to be now the new litmus test of, are you a true conservative or not? Steve Scalise won't be. It'll be Jim Jordan. And so there will be a slow acquiescence of everybody to Jim Jordan. That's my prediction. I certainly hope for the country I'm wrong. But I'll also say this, if he becomes speaker, it will be interesting to see how a shut it all down kind of guy actually governs a country.
That's Adam Kinzinger on CNN with Anderson Cooper saying that he believes that people wouldn't vote for Jim Jordan. I want to get to the bottom of that and a couple other things with our guest, Congressman Matt Gaetz from Florida. Some say he's a bomb thrower. Some say he's a patriot. We've got him on the line to give us the breakdown. Congressman Matt Gaetz, welcome, sir.
Hey, Rich, and I definitely choose patriot and bomb thrower, actually.
A bomb-throwing patriot.
That's right. Sometimes you need those, actually.
I'm with you on that one, brother. So glad you joined us tonight. I wanted to get into a couple of things. First of all, it seems like the consensus is a lot of people are gravitating towards Jim Jordan. What are your thoughts?
Jim Jordan is my mentor. He's someone I've styled much of my own service in the Congress after. He is our most talented, hardest working member, and I think he would make a phenomenal speaker. I also think very highly of Steve Scalise. Steve Scalise has the most inspirational story in the entire Congress. He has shown a commitment to the institution, a grit. He's someone who's broadly, well thought of throughout every segment of the Republican conference. And then you get the wild card, right? You've got President Trump saying, hey, if you need somebody to be interim, he may be coming to Washington, D.C. on
might
Tuesday.
come in clutch.
So I guess if the options are Jordan, Scalise, or Trump, the one thing we know for certain at this stage of the game is that the House of Representatives will be led by someone who is more conservative, more principled, and better thought of than the prior speaker. And in that sense, we've got an upgrade.
Now, when we talk about that, and this was something I was wargaming a little bit with your colleague, Congressman Ronnie Jackson, with the tight, or I should say slim majority that you guys have, if we put somebody that can't, if three people decide to go for Trump, it may ruin the whole thing, right? You won't get the 218, or you just might get the 218. Do you think a lot of people are going to put forward Donald Trump for speaker, and would it matter, or would we just have to go more rounds of votes to finally agree on somebody?
Well, it may be the case that, for a round, people want to show a symbolic gesture of support to President Trump. I nominated President Trump back in January, actually gave a nominating speech for him. So I see the vision in that. But at the end of the day, my expectation is that most people will want to be where a majority of the conference is on this, particularly when you've got multiple great options before us. So I'm all in. If Trump wants to do it, I could really get behind that because I know he's got a lot going on right now with the campaign and having to kind of single-handedly samurai off all of these nonsense legal matters that the Democrats are using in an aggressive lawfare strategy. And the House of Representatives is really the sole institution that the American people can believe in right now and have hope in for conservative change and for some test and check against the Biden administration that's been weaponized against them.
Now, a couple of other colleagues of yours, Graves and Desposito, they're saying they're really upset with you, that you've torn down the institution. There's some talk about trying to make a move for expulsion, which doesn't seem like it would have any legs. What's your reaction to that?
Well, they want to expel me because I followed the rules and demanded that our leadership follow the law to write a budget. Think about what that says about where things stand in Washington, D.C. right now. That if someone says, look, since 1974, a law has been on the books requiring the Congress to write a budget. In January, Kevin McCarthy looked us in the eye and said, we will have a balanced budget. We will have single subject appropriations bills. We will not get to September and get backed up against a continuing resolution. And instead of doing the things he promised, he sent everybody home on a 6-week vacation and then, reverted to the old Washington muscle memory of continuing resolutions to back people up against the holidays. And I've been here for 7 years. I'm willing to die on the Hill to get a spending strategy that puts downward pressure on spending. And I know that McCarthy wasn't taking us there. I knew it with absolute certainty. And I knew that he was doing so in violation of this power sharing agreement that he had entered into with House conservatives in January. So if we were going to allow that January agreement to just be in open and raw breach then we would look less serious and people would believe in us less. And I think right now, folks have to be able to have some hope that there's someone here in Washington fighting for them, and it wasn't Kevin McCarthy. It sure could be a Jim Jordan, a Steve Scalise, a Donald Trump.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I totally get that. I mean, those are the rules of the game. He agreed to those rules of the game. You held him to account. Some of your critics are saying that this created an unnecessary mess that empowers Democrats. What do you say to that?
Well, the unnecessary mess that empowers Democrats is not us booting McCarthy and taking a few extra votes to upgrade the position. The complete mess that empowered Democrats was the debt limit bill that many of my critics voted for. A debt limit bill that not only increased the debt limit, that totally suspended the debt limit until January 1 of 2025. So the very people who gave Joe Biden an unlimited amount of leash to drive up debt in our country, to drive higher interest rates, to drive up higher costs for household goods, they think that a few extra votes in Washington, D.C. is disruptive. I believe that the collapse of the American dollar would be disruptive, and that's what I'm working to stop.
Do you think that McCarthy didn't take your threat seriously? Earlier in the week, I played a clip of him on one of the Sunday shows saying, oh, Matt's this and Matt's that, and, bring it on. And you brought it on. Do you think he didn't take the threat seriously that you would actually exercise a motion to vacate?
I don't know, and I regret that it got to this point. Honestly, I gave a very serious speech on August 31st on the House floor, and I laid out the things that the Speaker had to do, and I stressed that it was within Kevin McCarthy's total control whether or not he would face a motion to vacate, because contrary to what you've heard from my critics, I wasn't making demands on Kevin McCarthy to compel some sort of action from Joe Biden or the Senate, some impossible task, right? It's not an impossible task for the House of Representatives to put up a balanced budget like he promised. It is not an impossible task for the House of Representatives to have a plan to fund the government through single subject spending bills like he promised. So these were things he could have done. He chose not to do them. And I don't think that was just ignorance or poor judgment. I think it's because that's how the lobbyists and the special interests who owned Kevin McCarthy accumulate power and enforce their will. Because if everything's backed up where it's one big up or down vote on everything, you've got a few people with some green eye shades and a back room writing the entire budget of the government of the United States of America. And if you buy off the right politicians at the top, that means your interests, they're going to be reflected in that legislation. And what's good for the American people gets downgraded. And I've seen it year after year after year. And I was willing to do what was necessary to break the fever of that inclination.
So here we are, and my hope is, as a conservative bystander, I'm looking at this and I say, well, you know what? It looks a little ugly right now. People are freaking out. But if we end up with a Jim Jordan, I think we're in way better shape than we were before, and that's a good thing. There's also the question of timing, and I get it. Sometimes it's not a right time to pull the trigger on keeping your word. And with the middle of this CR and another CR, and that's exactly what sounds like you're debating, is not putting forth any more CRs and actually balancing a budget. Do you feel that we're actually going to get to that stage? Hopefully what you did isn't in vain?
Look, the fight is not over. Kevin McCarthy moving out of the Speaker's office is not a reason to uncork the champagne. We have to get to the deliverable. I viewed him as a barrier to that deliverable. But the deliverable is the budgets that balance, and it's certainly the bills that are presented for individual scrutiny and review with open amendments for Republicans and Democrats to offer their ideas to reduce spending. I do think we've got upgrades at the position across the board with either Jordan or Scalise. I think highly of those guys, and I'm not certain that either of them is 1,000% committed to my view on fiscal matters, and that's why, frankly, I haven't decided which of the two to support, because I want to have a real clear conversation with each about their plans to reduce spending.
If you don't think either of them are on board with your vision, why not throw your hat in the ring? I think there's a lot of people that would like to see you as Speaker.
Well, I would make a great leader. I just have far too few followers. And I think, I joked with someone earlier today, I can't even keep a food tester in this town because they keep dying on me. But my role in the movement is not to be, at the helm of the House of Representatives. But I do hope that I am, a weighted keel of the vessel, and that I can keep us, steady and going in the right place despite the turbulent waters. And to me, that means breaking this corrupt cycle that has empowered the special interests, that has driven up, just the cost of everything. I mean, $700 every month is the increase to every American family when compared to the same time last year. In 99% of American counties, the average income does not give you affordability to be able to buy a home. And these are the consequences of irresponsible decisions in Washington. Those decisions emerge from a corrupt process, and that's why I'm trying to use every tool at my disposal to change it.
Switching gears real quick, Joe Biden's building a border wall, sir, and I like to call him Joe El Baboso Biden. And I find it I couldn't stop laughing when I read this article. What are your thoughts on Joe Biden building miles of border wall?
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember when Democrats were calling walls racist while they were living behind them for their own protection. But it shows how much the conditions of this unchecked immigration have moved the Overton window. It used to be the case back in the mid-'90s. Democrats were actually for physical security at the border. It in the 1996 platform for the Democratic Party, they were in favor of physical barriers, and the wokeification of the Democratic Party led to these sanctuary jurisdictions and the ability for illegal aliens to get all kind of welfare benefits, health care, transportation, child care, education, and it put an incredible strain on communities and on social safety nets that, of course, we want to preserve for our fellow Americans and people who are here legally. So that, I think, has really caused an awakening. In every political survey I've seen in the last month, the number one issue is immigration. And that's because people can see with their own eyes that the Biden administration has created conditions of chaos on purpose at the border. And so I think this is a signal that the window's moved and we're winning the argument. Now we've got to get the policies in place so that there's not the incentive to come here illegally in mass.
I hear that, brother. And from your lips to God's ears that we can get that done. Folks, we're on with Congressman Matt Gaetz, Republican from Florida. Congressman, I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. You're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot, no matter what they say. Keep throwing the bombs.
All right, man. Thanks so much for having me.
You got it. Take care. Folks, there's more to come straight ahead. Don't move a muscle. It's Rich Valdez, America at Night.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Why does his own Department of Homeland Security Secretary say in a public notice, quote, there is presently an acute and immediate need to construct physical barriers?
Here's what I can say. I can speak to what the president was very clear in saying, and also what you all have been reporting about this construction. So the facts are this is not new. These funds were appropriated in fiscal year 2019 under Republican leadership, and DHS is required by law to use the funds for appropriated purpose. That's what we're seeing. This was announced back in June by the DHS. And so, look, we believe that there are better effective ways of moving forward to secure our border and security, our border security, and we have continuously asked for Congress to act, to provide our CBP, the law enforcement at the border, to give them the resources they need to do their jobs.
So KJP again is talking in circles. She's saying, and that's White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre. She says, we've been clear, we've been clear, we've been clear. But again, what I heard yesterday from the Associated Press, and they got this from the announcement on the U.S. Federal Register, is that, a registry rather, is that Secretary Mayorkas said, quote, there is presently an acute and immediate need to construct physical barriers and roads in the vicinity of the border of the United States in order to prevent unlawful entries into the United States in the project areas. That's a quote from Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, coming right out of the notice published yesterday in the Federal Registry. So, how is it that he turns around today and says this?
There is no new administration policy with respect to the border wall. From day one, this administration has made clear that a border wall is not the answer. That remains our position, and our position has never wavered. The construction project reported today was appropriated, funded during the prior administration in 2019, and the law requires the government to use these funds for this purpose. We have repeatedly asked Congress to rescind this money, but it has not done so, and we are compelled to follow the law.
So that's Mayorkas again saying they're compelled to, as if, oh, we got our hands tied. Trump has our hands tied. It's all his fault, blah, blah, blah. But they literally bypassed 26 federal laws in order to do this. So how do we go about this? And again, the quote from the Federal Registry says that they cited, quote, high illegal entry. So I'm just not clear here how you say one thing in writing where you're moving forward with the building of the wall, and then you come out and say, well, no, it's not the wall. And I'll tell you why. Because politicians talk out of both sides of their mouths, and typically it's the Democrat politicians that are mainly doing it. But again, they're probably all guilty of it, and it's a fair statement. This one isn't working. So, folks, stick around. We got more to discuss on this and everything else, plus your calls, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I'll answer one question on the border wall. The border wall, the money was appropriated for the border wall. I tried to get them to reappropriate, to redirect that money. They didn't. They wouldn't. And in the meantime, there's nothing under the law other than they have to use the money for what it was appropriated. I can't stop that.
Do you believe the border wall works?
No.
All right, that's Joe Biden again with the back pedal. But yet they waived 26 federal laws. These laws include laws to protect wildlife and public health. This is reported in the New York Post. The Clean Air Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, Endangered Species Act, Solid Waste Disposal Act, Farmland Protection Policy Act, and Native American Graves and Protection Repatriation Act. So, Joe Biden, I say you're full of it. Your nickname should not be Robin Beware. It should be BS Joe Biden. Joe El Baboso Biden lies again. He's full of it, and he's building 200 miles of border wall. And he's an even bigger chump if he's doing it because Trump is forcing him to do it. You got to love that. Folks, straight ahead, we're going to talk about a spy from Iran at the Pentagon.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And our phone number, if you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And as I was mentioning earlier, there's a bunch of things going on with the news today. There's a new report that the FBI is now weaponizing its resources to monitor Trump supporters in the run up to 2024. I wondered why there was a black SUV following me the other day. Now I have an inclination of why. Now, I want to talk a little bit about domestic policy and foreign policy, kind of where the intersection thereof, if you will. There's an excellent piece in Tablet magazine, and let me give you the headline. Watch this. High-level Iranian spy busted in Washington. It's actually a spy ring. The trail that leads from Tehran to D.C. passes directly through the offices of Robert Malley and the International Crisis Group. Now, one would think it is the job of every spy to get a job in industry and government and report back to their country. But one would also believe that in the United States, we have better counterintelligence protocols than others, and that we would catch these guys. So thankfully, we did catch these guys, but I'm just shocked that, this is going on in D.C., and perhaps that's my own naivete. I'm pretty sure there's a ton of spies in D.C. Posing as diplomats, posing as many different things. But I want to get to the bottom of it. I want to do it with our buddy Lee Smith. He's the only other Puerto Rican I know the only other conservative I know born in Puerto Rico. Lee Smith, welcome, sir.
Rich, thank you so much for inviting me on tonight to be with your great audience, and thanks for the cool introduction.
You bet. Now, folks, we've had Lee Smith on before. He's a columnist with Tablet magazine. And Lee Smith, your headline here, high-level Iranian spy ring busted in Washington. Tell us about it. Yeah,
well, actually, our national security apparatus hasn't done anything about it yet. It was a tranche of emails, Iranian government emails between a number of different figures who work in Washington, D.C., at various think tanks that gave evidence of what was going on. This Iranian spy unit was set up by the regime in 2014 to help push Iran's interest in the negotiations over Iran's nuclear program during the Barack Obama administration. And so what we've seen not quite 10 years later, but nearly 10 years later, we've seen now that one of the members of this spy ring, a woman named Ariana Tabatabai, was employed at the State Department starting in February 2021 and is now at the Pentagon. Now, astonishingly, Rich, this person is still at the Pentagon, even though these emails are now in public, even though a number of different stories in addition to mine have been published. And there's a number of different Republican senators who have brought attention to this, who've been hollering rightly about it, but she's still at the Pentagon. And astonishingly, she is the chief of staff, the deputy director of defense in the Office for Special Operations. That is, this person has top secret, compartmentalized intelligence regarding some of America's not only most vital secrets, but most sensitive missions. It's a pretty shocking story, and it's pretty shocking that no one in the government administration has done anything about it yet. And Rich, I think one of the reasons is for what you were talking about in the introduction. This is an administration, a White House, that is more focused on targeting its domestic opponents than it is in rooting out American adversaries. Of course, unfortunately, that also raises the question whether or not the Biden administration actually perceives the Islamic Republic of Iran, a terror regime with plenty of American blood on its hands, as an American adversary, or rather do they see it as an American ally? That's certainly how Barack Obama saw it, and that's why Barack Obama wanted to legalize their nuclear weapons program and the deal that Donald Trump withdrew from in May 2018. But Joe Biden and his White House are keen to restore that deal in order to get the Iranians a fully legal industrial-scale nuclear weapons program.
All right, so let's hold on a second here, Lou Smith, because that was a lot.
I know
that was a lot.
There's
so
a lot there. I know. I'm sorry. I just got on a riff. Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's fine. I didn't mind that. I'm just saying, you had me at nobody in our government's national security establishment has done anything to stop this, and the fact that they're still there. How does something like that happen, in your opinion?
Well, in my article, I quote a former CIA official, a great guy, Peter Theroux. And Peter worked when he was at the CIA. And Peter said, well, look, the optimistic reading is that the FBI found out about her and what she was doing, and they started following her, and they teched up her apartment, as Peter puts it in the piece. That's the optimistic reading. And then, as Peter says, but to believe that, you have to believe the FBI is clean, right, rather than complicit in what went on. It looks to me like the less optimistic reading is more plausible, and that is that the Biden administration knew exactly what they were getting with this person. And they allowed Robert Malley, who was their Iran envoy, to push this woman into the State Department and now into the Pentagon. And Malley, I should say, is on leave, and his security clearances have been suspended. That happened in April, and it appears that this spy ring, which he credentialed and supported in the private sector, again, it's kind of a dense story, so I'll try to pull it out as much as possible. But to answer your main question, I think that our national security establishment knew exactly what they were getting. But this is what the president and this is what the White House wanted. They wanted this person in the State Department. As preposterous as this sounds, it's crazy, I know. But they definitely knew who she was. Why? Because we know about foreign intelligence intercepts, right? And neither the FBI nor any other agencies paid any attention to the regulations they're supposed to abide by, right? They unmasked Trump officials. They unmasked pro-Israel activists and U.S. lawmakers during the Iran deal. So there is no doubt in my mind that they were listening in, and they knew about this woman's communications with high-ranking Iranian regime officials. So the White House knew about it. The FBI knew about it because they're the ones who were doing counterintelligence. And goodness only knows what other agencies knew about it too. But definitely they knew about it. And we know that one of the reasons, more evidence that they knew about it is the fact that she's still there, right? If they were surprised and shocked and scandalized, they would have moved her out right away as soon as they found out about these emails and as soon as these stories started breaking over the last 2 weeks.
So now this Robert Malley, he's in the wind.
Yeah.
Where do you think he is?
Well, I mean, he's on leave. I mean, he's apparently already gotten an appointment at a couple of Ivy League universities, I believe at Princeton and maybe
so he's
at
not
Yale
really
as well.
He's just
out
of the picture.
Sure. Oh, no, they just moved him out of the government. That's it. It's not like I think that everyone who's involved in this, look, here's the most depressing feature of this story. That even though it's in public now, the very bad things that were done by the Biden administration and by Biden officials, it's unlikely, Rich, that anyone's ever going to pay a price for inserting an Iranian agent into the United States government, first at the State Department and now at the Pentagon. I doubt Robert Malley's going to pay a price. I doubt it's even going to affect the reputation of the Biden administration, as shocking as it is.
So we get to keep Miss Ariane Tabatabai.
Yes, right. Yes, she'll. I mean, look. I mean, maybe they'll move her out at some point, right? They'll try to do it. If they do it, though, they'll do it very quietly when no one's looking, so it doesn't look as though they're admitting a mistake with what they did. But right now, she is still at the Pentagon. She's still chief of staff for the deputy secretary of special operations. It's astonishing.
And that's Christopher Meyer. Now, again, just pure speculation. Do you think Christopher Meyer's an unwitting participant in this? Do you think he's fully aware? Is he part of this spy ring as well?
I don't know. I mean, that's a very good question. Whether you would think that they have pretty good intelligence in the Pentagon too.
I would hope.
And people would start asking questions. Say, okay, so where did she come from before? What are her? And as I go through the story, the CIA, former CIA official I talked to says just one of the things to get clearances in, they grill you on all your foreign contacts. And when you're talking about foreign governments, that takes it to another. And then when we're talking about what our intelligence agencies call non-frat governments, those are real American adversaries like China, like Russia, like Iran, like Cuba. Venezuela may be on that list right now, I'm not sure. But once you're talking about someone who has high-level contacts with non-frat governments, that should prevent entirely anyone from getting any sort of clearance. So I don't know what role Mr. Meyer at the Pentagon played in this, but I find it unlikely he didn't know about this. It seems that everyone in the U.S. government who needed to know would have known about it.
Shocking. It really is. I mean, again, I should say disappointing, but not surprising, because, it really doesn't shock me, but it is disappointing. Folks, we're on with Lee Smith. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that this is part, unfortunately, of a long tradition right now. And unfortunately, it's not just Democrats, Rich. A lot of Republicans have done bad things. I mean, one of the things I've been looking at, and we may have talked about it, is the long U.S. relations with the Chinese Communist Party. Yeah. I mean, the amount of stuff that's going on throughout our government, both in the executive branch and the legislative branch, it's just amazing. So maybe they've just come to take this for granted, that this is how Washington now operates.
Yeah, it's a pretty depraved culture, lamentably. And Lee Smith, he is a columnist with Tablet Magazine. We're going to continue our conversation. He's got another excellent piece here in the Tablet. The war on Trump is a war on millions. I want to get to the bottom of that as well, as there's just news every day of Trump. You can't say this, you can't say that, yet he's got a great statement every day. So I kind of love that. Anyway, folks, we're coming right back with Lee Smith. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Rich Valdez, our guest, Lee Smith. He's a columnist with the Tablet Magazine. And there's a bunch of news all the time about Trump. And I want to get Lee Smith's take on a number of things, because there's just a lot. There's just a lot out there. Lee Smith, what's your take on what's currently going on with the 24 election, and in particular Trump's current legal dilemma?
Well, not knowing much about the law, I'm hesitant to give too many opinions about that, though, since I have been following Justice Department and FBI corruption for a little bit now, and I know a fair amount about that. Well, let's leave that for another time. But yeah, I mean, my sense is that these are all ginned up. They're all phony charges. They're all phony indictments. And one of the things I think we have to recognize is that they're scared of Donald Trump. Now, there's a theory that's been circulating, and I hear it fairly often. I'm sure you do too, Rich, and folks in your audience too, this idea that, oh no, the Democrats are just going after Trump to try to elicit a whole bunch of sympathy because they really want to run against Donald Trump and they're scared of DeSantis or Nikki Haley or whatever they're supposed to be scared of. That's just not how the Democrats operate. They're trying to destroy Trump to destroy Donald Trump, right? They're going after Trump aides. They're going after his lawyers. They're going after Trump supporters. They're not doing this to elicit sympathy. There's no bank shot involved here. That's too clever for politics. Politics, it's all big colors, big shapes. They just want to destroy Donald Trump. What that tells us is, as we've heard from some big Democratic Party bosses like Donna Brazile, they're scared of Donald Trump. They believe even with everything they have going, even with the press in their corner, the intelligence services in their corner, big tech, even with all they can do as they did it in 2020, even with all the election laws that were unconstitutionally revised, they're still terrified of Donald Trump, and that's why they want to destroy him. So for me, Rich, I don't know about you, but I haven't had a whole lot of faith in polls the last few years. I kind of see them in the same context as the regular, mainstream media. There's something you can learn from it, but they're not entirely credible. I think that I think the big thing is we see all of their moves against Trump. We see it in the federal charges. We see the state charges. We see what's going on in Manhattan courtrooms. They're worried about Donald Trump. Why? Because a lot of people are starting to see what's been going on with the country, whether that has to do with, with opening our borders, whether that has to do with the amount of money being thrown for a proxy war in Eastern Europe on the border of a nuclear armed power, whether it has to do with inflation, whether it has to do with energy prices that are rising again, whether it has to do with the different insane regulations coming out of this administration, whether it has to do with the different social and cultural initiatives they're pushing, like standing behind the trans agenda. So I think a lot of Americans are looking and saying, okay, we didn't know that this is what Joe Biden and the Democratic Party were actually about. So they have good reason to be worried. That's how I see it. But they're not going to relent, and it's going to get worse. It's bad now, but over the next year, over the next 13 months, I believe it's going to get even worse. The kinds of pressures, the kind of things they're going to throw at Donald Trump and his supporters and at the country at large. Remember what they did last time with COVID. They wanted to terrorize and terrify the entire country. And a lot of us were terrorized and terrified. Not everyone, thank goodness, but they're definitely going to opt for that again, whether it's another, whether it's some kind of new mandates or whatever. It's going to get bad again.
Lee Smith, let everybody know how they can follow you quickly.
On Truth Social, Lee Smith, DC. Same on Twitter, Lee Smith in DC, and also my locals page, leesmith.locals.com. Thank you, Rich. That's really cool.
You bet, brother. You're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot, Lee Smith. Folks, we're coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And today there were competing arguments being heard in federal court as jurors heard different explanations on why FTX collapsed. If you remember, that was the cryptocurrency exchange founded by Sam Bankman-Fried. This guy Fried was into a lot of things, and he got into a bunch of trouble. And I find it interesting that I didn't read about this until just a little while ago. And why? Because the headlines are dominated by who's going to be the next speaker, is Trump going to be the temporary speaker, and all sorts of other stuff. And, when we look at the world of finance and the economics and all of this crazy, there's so much going on in the news and so little to be talked about lately, at least when you look at, some of the big legacy media. So I want to talk about the latest with the student loan debacle, because people are now expected to pay back their loans as of a few days ago, right? Starting October 1st, people had to start paying back their debt. And the average federal student loan debt is $37,000, just over that, $37,338. And I think I probably have had that much in student loans myself. And it's just interesting to see how this is happening, and the administration, the Biden administration's constantly conjuring up a new way to try to make this go away for people. I think, A, in an effort to earn some votes, and B, really, because they truly have a belief that government is in place for that purpose, to say, oh, we can cancel your debt. And there are people that believe that they should borrow money from banks. Just imagine if I went to a friend of mine and said, hey, listen, I'm going on vacation. And, I spent more than I thought on the ticket. Can you loan me $1,000? I'm starting a new job soon, and I'll pay you back next week. Next week comes around, and I say, you know what? I didn't get that job, so I'm going to need you to cancel my debt. How does that even work? It doesn't work. So that's why I want to talk to Bill Dendy. He's a financial advisor with Raymond James, and he's our guest. Bill Dendy, welcome, sir.
Hey, it's great to be with you. And it's interesting. We've had a 3-year hiatus on making these payments. And you would think over the 3-year hiatus, a lot of people would take that opportunity to get things in line so that they would know that this day would eventually come and the payments would be due, and they would have a store of money already set aside, ready to go. But for a lot of people, either the jobs weren't there or the discipline wasn't there to not expand their lifestyles and put that money aside. And so we hear a lot of folks saying that with this October 1st, beginning of the payments, they just don't have it to pay. And there's no way they're going to be able to make their budgets work it into the system.
Bill Dendy, this is one of those things that really doesn't fit in my head. And I usually get both sides of every political argument or whatever it is. This is one that I'm looking at, images and these articles of people holding up signs saying, cancel my loan or cancel my student loan. And I'm thinking, when did that become a commonplace practice to willfully take a student loan and then willfully just say, cancel my debt? I mean, imagine buying a car and you go, listen, it didn't work out how I thought. I want you to cancel. The only time they're canceling your car loan is when they repo your car or you pay it off, one or the other. I don't understand why it's become somehow acceptable in the minds of anybody that you can go and borrow money, but you don't have to pay it back. What am I missing, Bill Dendy?
Well, a lot of these students were led to believe it would work out that way. The administration itself led them to believe that this is going to be a push going forward, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court before it got struck down. So it got awful close to having a lot of debt canceled. But keep in mind that even with the broad canceling not being allowed, Biden just this week canceled another $9 billion of debt. And overall, we've canceled $127 billion, $127 billion of the $1.7 trillion of debt for like 3.6 million borrowers. And so there's been a lot of debt already canceled. And this is the part that got through. And part of it's canceled under a program of people were misled. There was like $37 million that was canceled for those who took out loans and went to the University of Phoenix because the University of Phoenix was overinflating the value of a degree and may not have had enough of its students get through the program. And I think that's interesting that we see that a lot of people that borrow money don't ever finish their degree plan. And I think it's interesting that they're putting that back on the schools, not the students who didn't find a way to finish the degree plan. So there's a whole lot of not taking responsibility, perhaps, but there may be some people who were taken advantage of. And there are people that may be disabled and not able to make the payments, and you can understand those. But I think you're right. The administration would like to totally eliminate all the debt of all students and have government pay for our education. And that sounds a whole lot like I have a friend that came from Cuba. And they said there, education's free, and you're encouraged to go ahead and be a doctor or get as much education as you can get. Of course, you don't get paid a whole lot for doing that, and it is a communist country, so I don't know.
You know, Bill Dendy, when you go to school in Cuba to become a doctor, a dentist, or a lawyer, you don't open up your own financial services practice. You don't open up your own medical practice. You work for the government. So it makes sense for them to have people going to school to do these things because that's their workforce. And they don't have the opportunity to move forward, which is really crazy. But when you look at that, to me, it seems like if the federal government in the United States wants to educate people at baccalaureate level, the master's level, doctoral level, whatever, what have you, and it's free, then perhaps we should really question whether it's free and what they're teaching. Somebody once told me, and not to get too off the deep end here, but it's an interesting point that you raised. Somebody once told me, not everything is bad about communism. And when you look at the Castro regime, when they came in, literacy rates and children's literacy rates skyrocketed. And I thought to myself, anybody could cook the books and come up with any numbers they want. But B, the reason kids were reading so much was because Castro made it his business to make sure that they were teaching about Castro and how great he was and how bad the imperialist Yankee Americans are. And this was their way of obviously, re-educating people to their communist ideals. And I just think to myself, we see so much with the rise of different types of philosophies, whether it's the Marxist philosophies or others that are in our institutions of higher learning, that it makes me think once the government really has control by way of, forgiving debt that people borrow, et cetera, there's, I guess I'm trying to say, I think they'll have total control of what people learn. And it already almost seems like they have total control. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's interesting that they are now putting in place programs so that you don't borrow more than your degree can sustain. And this may be good in that I know that for my own son, who's 21, we talked about that not all degrees are going to be financially equal when you come into the marketplace.
Yeah,
that
for sure.
Some degrees people are going to pay you to have, and other degrees you're going to have just because you enjoyed learning that medieval literature or might want to go teach philosophy. But it's not that you shouldn't study, but you should be aware of the financial clout of each degree so that you don't get yourself in an upside down situation where you're borrowing money with the belief that you're going to be able to earn as much as a chemical engineer earns with a degree in humanities, perhaps. But I think that education for the person to make an informed decision and then do what their heart calls them to do is the freedom that we've enjoyed here in America that you don't want to give up. And you also don't want to give up the ability for people to have to go from the lowest economic strata to the highest, to be highly rewarded if they are able to produce something that's great for the economy. And it gives you that edge. It gives you that creativity. It creates an abundance. I think that if you look at the final regimes of the workings of communist countries, yes, they can drive various things in a hurry. I was in Cuba in 2021. Everybody had a mask. They do wait in line. They all got their vaccines, one after the other. Things happen quickly in a communist country, and that's kind of good. But then again, there was no food on the shelves. There was no entrepreneurial spirit. There wasn't any reason to really want to do a whole lot more, because even if you did do all that extra study and you became a doctor, you didn't make all that much more than the trash collector. And so you kind of took away a lot of incentive for people to do more and to give back to the economy. So there is all that negative, and I think that we're talking about that kind of philosophy. It's not just students that have borrowed a whole lot of money, and it's not just the students themselves. And we're talking about this $1.7 trillion and how are they going to pay it back, and should they have expected to have it forgiven, and maybe they weren't responsible at the front end. I hear arguments on both sides, but keep in mind, this is $1.7 trillion. We also have over $1 trillion in credit card debt. This stuff has mushroomed since 2008, when we had like $600 billion in those areas. And if we start seeing defaults, there are economists who are saying this may be the domino effect or the straws that are starting to add onto the camel's back that may cause a collapse in our economy, a recession that would impact everybody.
Yeah. And that's the fear I think that most of us have. Folks, we're on with Bill Dendy, a financial advisor with Raymond James, and we're going to continue this discussion. And I want to continue pulling on that particular thread. What happens when the crows come home to roost with all the consumer debt that we've amassed? That's reached an epic level, as well as our national debt. We just hit $33 trillion for the first time. We're borrowing $2 trillion just to cover the interest on the $33 trillion that we owe now. These are astronomical numbers. I don't even know how many zeros those are. I've never had to count to $1 trillion. But folks, stick with us. We're coming right back with Bill Dendy. It's America at Night with me, Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We're getting to your calls momentarily. Folks, we're on with Bill Dendy. He's a financial advisor with Raymond James. And my question to him was, we have a student loan debacle that we all know about. We have a consumer debt problem that we all know about. And we have a federal deficit issue with our federal debt finally getting to $33 trillion. $2 trillion is currently going, is being borrowed to cover the interest on that. Bill Dendy, where do we go?
Well, it seems like we've got our debt snowball going on, and every time we've raised the debt ceiling, we say that's astronomical. We're going to have to stop. It's going to get high enough to where we're going to use a debt ceiling for what it was intended to do, which is to stop government spending. We, just like a household with a finite number of resources with potentially infinite desires, you have to start prioritizing the desires and not do everything you want to do. And our challenge is no politician wants to be the one to take anything away, and it's a lot easier just to keep adding. So the idea was a debt ceiling would make us have to do that hard negotiation, but instead what it's caused is every time we come up to the debt ceiling, we threaten to close down the government, and if we close down the government, we send everyone home except the non-essentials. The non-essentials are expected to work for free for a while Congress debates and figures it out, and then ends up going ahead and raising the debt ceiling once again. So I don't know if we have a solution for this. The question is, how long can it go on? And it will go on for as long as the world will allow it to go on and continue to recognize the United States as the currency is good and our word is good. The United States is one of the few countries that's never repudiated debt. We have never defaulted. We pay our debt. We may borrow money to pay it with, but we pay that debt, by golly. And so as long as we continue to pay and the world continues to trade with us, and we continue to have that strong economy, which is based upon our ability to produce and have output and creativity, it looks like it has been able to continue on. But a lot of economists say it can and it has, but it may one day hit a breaking point, and we may hit the brakes in a big hurry, and that could be that big recession that people have been worried about for a lot of years now.
How do you think that the consumer debt continues to go up, or do you think the fact that the Fed continues to raise interest rates is going to slow down consumer debt growth because of the shrinking economy, or does it balloon from here forward?
Well, it's kind of interesting that for a lot of consumers, as the cost of things was going up, over 2 years, we looked at almost a 20% increase over that 2-year period on most things that consumers consume. So if they were seeing their cost of things go up by 20%, but their salary is not going up by nearly that much, right. With almost every dollar already spoken for, a lot of folks turn to their credit cards to maintain their lifestyle. They didn't do the old what's our needs versus our wants and make some hard decisions. They did the easy thing, which is to use the credit card. Unfortunately, in order to slow down the inflation, the Fed raises interest rates. And credit card debt, being variable interest rate debt, got more expensive to carry each dollar. Variable interest rate mortgages got more expensive at the same time that everything else was costing more. So it was like a 1-2 punch for the consumer. And we had the credit card debt, once again, as we mentioned, rise up over $1 trillion. You eventually reach the point where people have to finally have that rough conversation with themselves and figure a way to stop this rapid accumulation of debt that they may not be able to pay back. And it'll happen one way or another. They will either default on their payments and the credit will go away and they will be forced to make a decision, or they will consciously make a decision that I'm not going to keep wasting this many dollars in interest each month, and I will start slowing things down. But either way, it's going to probably create more of a slowdown. And that's what the Fed wanted. The Fed wanted us to slow down our demand.
Seems to be working. All right, Bill Dendy, stick with us. We're coming right back. We're on with Bill Dendy, financial advisor with Raymond James. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, welcome back. We're on with Bill Dendy, financial advisor with Raymond James, founder of Alicorn Investment Management. And we're going to go to Mark in Cleveland, Ohio. Mark, you got 20 seconds. Go for it.
All right, Mr. Denny, why would these lenders, knowing these people are going to use the money, like I say, not maybe for school, but auto, clothing, whatever they might desire, knowing that when you come to borrow money, already that tells you that person doesn't have funds available for spending?
Well, it's kind of interesting that of this $1.7 trillion of student loan debt, 92% of that is not private lenders. That's federal-backed student loan debt. So a lot of this is backed by our government, so they're not as worried about getting paid back because the government's pretty sure that they can eventually get that money paid back.
Bill Dendy, thank you for your response. Thanks for being with us tonight. Folks, check him out online. And Open Phone America is coming up straight ahead. Don't move a muscle. I'm Rich Valdez, and we're coming right back.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And this is the third and final hour of the program where you get to call in and be heard on whatever topic you like. We've had some really interesting discussions. We had Congressman Matt Gaetz on earlier, correcting the record, firing back at his critics. And it was a pretty good discussion. If you missed it, check it out at Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com. That will be up shortly right after we wrap up this hour. And we also had some excellent conversation with Lee Smith, who had a really good piece on this Iranian spy who's apparently working in the Pentagon, chief of staff to the Deputy Secretary for Operations. And that's just crazy. And we talked about the current situation with debt, college loan debt, credit card debt, and federal debt. We're in bad shape. Hopefully it gets better. Now, I want to talk about Biden. I started off with this a little bit earlier. Last night I talked about it as well. We have Biden building 200 miles of border wall, saying that, sorry? 20 miles. I keep getting that number wrong. 2 feet, 20 miles, 200 miles, whatever it is. And whatever the case is, 20 miles of border wall. And he's saying, no, they're doing it. I got my hands tied. It's Congress forcing me to do it. It's the Trump administration forcing me to do it. Yet it's he that had to waive these 26 federal laws to get it done. But he's out there today with Alejandro Mayorkas and KJP. They're all out there saying, no. They're twisting our arm, folks. They're twisting our arm. Listen to this.
I'll answer one question on the border wall. The border wall, the money was appropriated for the border wall. I tried to get them to reappropriate, to redirect that money. They didn't. They wouldn't. And in the meantime, there's nothing under the law other than they have to use the money for what was appropriated. I can't stop that.
Do you believe the border wall works?
No.
And that's another episode of the powerless president, Joe El Barroso Biden. He can't do nothing about it. I don't believe him for a second. Listen, I want the border wall, but I don't believe Biden for a second. I think he understands that he has to control the flow of his illegal human smuggling business, and that's how he's going to control the flow, is pushing people to where he wants them, so he's going to build the rest of this under the guise of whatever. At least that's my opinion. What do I know? Now, this comes on the heels of a report that says that we now have students or teenagers that are being used by the cartels to become drug mules or human trafficking people or smugglers. Listen to this, CBS News. Cartels are using social media to recruit American teenagers for drugs, human smuggling, etc. in Arizona. In essence, they're serving as Uber for the cartels. Now, a couple of years back, not even, maybe a year ago, we talked about how they were actually calling Uber. People were getting to the Yuma sector and getting into Arizona and calling an Uber, telling them a mile marker or whatever, and voila, they were getting a ride to wherever they needed to go. That's how sophisticated this situation has become. So, according to CBS, the crisis that's gripping the southern border is turning Cochise County in Arizona into a dangerous raceway for drugs, human smuggling. We all know about that. But now it involves Americans, including American teenagers who are being recruited by the cartels through social media. That's fascinating. Sheriff Mark Daniels, Daniels, he says, we have over 100 juveniles in at least the last 18 months that we've apprehended in this county smuggling, all the way from the age of 13 and 12 years old, driving their grandma's car, a friend's car, mom and dad's car, all the way down here, and they're being recruited through social media. I think this is crazy. I mean, I could not imagine, hey, Dad, I want to go hang out tonight. Mom, can I borrow the car? Sure, honey. I'm just going to be down at the border smuggling some humans. Absolute insanity. If this is not out of control, I don't know what is. We heard about the kid that got his arm caught in a mechanical chicken separation machine at a chicken factory. Turns out the kid's in the country illegally, has no family in the country. This is slave labor being brought across the border just so that whomever chicken company can have cheap labor. And Joe Biden allows it. Unaccompanied minors, we got to let them in, asylum seekers, everybody's looking to... No. Keep building the wall. Build more wall. I mean, this is not the only way. I mean, there's a lot of ways. The number one way is to allow the federal law enforcement that's at the border to do their job, Border Patrol. They have to be able to do their job, and sadly, this is where we are. So I want to go to your calls and get your thoughts on everything we were talking about tonight. Let's go to Kim, Shields, Michigan, KDKA. Kim, go right ahead.
Good show, Rich. What I was calling about is this Biden. All of a sudden, he urgently needs 20 miles of border wall. When, like 3 weeks ago, I heard a story. It was on a number of my shows that the Biden administration was scrapping the expensive 30-foot metal fence panels that were like laying out in the desert resting.
Yeah, they got damaged because of the elements.
Yeah, and he was scrapping them like guys that go around with their pickup truck on trash day. He was scrapping those for pennies on the dollar. Now, all of a sudden, he needs 20 miles. I don't know what this is. I think Biden, you can't believe a word he said, and Mayorkas is even worse. And KGP is so unbelievably dishonest. But they can't clean this up. You know what I mean? They could, even if tomorrow Biden wised up and shut down the southern border, there's already between 7 and 8 million illegals that came in the last almost 3 years. They're not going anywhere till President Trump gets back in. And even then, some experts have said that unwinding what Biden did in the last 2.5 years could take decades. I hope it doesn't take that long. I think when President Trump gets in, he could fix it quick. But they can't, no matter what Biden tries to do in Mayorkas, they can't clean this up in 13 months. People are going to see this. And I say to Texas and these other states that are busing them, keep it up, keep it up. Every city you can think of. Now they're talking about taking busloads of them to Delaware, where Biden has 2 houses. You know, and like dumping them there. I say go for it. Let the people see exactly what this nut job freak show administration did. You know what I mean?
I'm with you on that one. Listen, Kim, I think you're spot on, and I do agree. I don't even know if we can fix it. That's the whole thing. We've never really had the apparatus to deport the people that were here before. The massive number of people we have now, I just don't see how it happens. There's been all this talk about not being able to use federal law enforcement. I mean, you would need, and like all of government, and not just federal government, I'm talking about all of every government, county sheriffs, local police departments. You would need everybody in every capacity of government to try and do this. And people are going to push back, saying it's unconstitutional, it's profiling, it's this and it's that. And it's probably right. You know, they'll probably see me driving down the road and pull me over. Hey, listen, brown guy, are you here? Let me see your papers. I just don't see how they do it. I don't see how they pull it off. The key, in my opinion, is to stop it. I hope they can do it. And, I mean, there's obviously ways that you can start to deport people, especially the ones you know, the ones that you've allowed in on some sort of phony asylum claim. But all the gotaways that preferred not to say anything and not pass go and collect $200 on their way in, they're in the wind. And that, to me, is a huge problem. Because every time they give these numbers, they go, and that doesn't even count the gotaways. The gotaways, I think, are our biggest problem. So we'll see how this thing plays out. I think this is a problem that's here to stay as well, lamentably. Kim in Shields, Michigan, listening on KDKA Online. Thank you so much, Kim. I appreciate it. Folks, we're coming back to the rest of your calls. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, welcome back, America. So the cartels are now using social media to recruit teens in the United States, American teenagers, to act as drug mules and human smugglers. In effect, Uber for the cartels. This is just so disappointing to me, but it is what it is. And that's what's going on. Thank you, Joe Biden. Thank you, Democrats that support Joe Biden's disastrous border policy. I can't imagine what the next low will be. Because, I always say, it's disappointing but not surprising. This one actually did surprise me. I didn't think that we'd be recruiting teenagers from social media. Once you say it, then I go, yeah, I could see how that would work. But I honestly didn't see that coming. That's one I didn't see coming our way. I want to get your opinions on this as well. 866-505-4626. The Legacy line is open and ready for you. Let's go to Paul, Boise, Idaho, KBOI. Paul, go right ahead.
Good evening, Rich.
Hey.
Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there's a lot of topics packed into what you just were talking about just right then and there. But I think the thing that struck me the most when Biden took office and the deaths that started with the fentanyl, it started to get worse and worse and worse, and the bodies just seemed to piling up. To me, it was almost like Joe Biden was really trying to make a point about something, and was somebody that can't make the point, but tries and uses his administration to make the point, and it's very confusing what they're trying to do. I thought that he was complicit with the fentanyl coming over the border. The numbers seem to jump from, I think it was 90,000 to this last year, they jumped to 111,000 deaths from fentanyl. And it's not the kind of fentanyl that hospitals use. It's something that's a lot stronger, and it can be cut up and put in every kind of drug that's used by drug abusers. So people that are
100%
that are taking one kind of drug are taking what they think is something that doesn't have it in it, and it's got it in it, and it's killing them. And
Paul, I think you're 100% right. What's happening now, again, my take on this is that Biden is half I don't care and the other half compromised, where somebody's leveraging him one way or another and getting him to do what they want to do. Some people, there's a lot of people out there, and I'm going to make an example that some people may get mad at and some may not. I know a lot of people growing up, and even now that I have kids that teenagers and young adults, there's a lot of people that say things like, look, they might as well drink here at home with me. I'd rather them drink here at home with me or whatever. I know people that have been using marijuana for a long time, and they'll be, you know what, I hope my kid's first time smoking weed is with me rather than doing it in the street. You never know. Right? So there are people that take that approach to things. And I feel like Joe Biden's doing the same thing. Look, they're going to smuggle people anyway. Look, they're going to bring in drugs anyway. We're not going to stop them. We've never stopped them. We've had a war on drugs since the 1980s. Nobody's stopping anything. And I feel like he just takes this laissez-faire approach, and he's like, look, so let me get into bed with these guys. Let me just, make a deal. Or he's leveraged, where they say, but again, what leverage could they possibly have? I don't know. If it's a threat, I mean, is it dirt on him? The dirt on him is everywhere. There's nothing but dirt on Joe Biden. So I feel like it's just the cartels have a stronghold. They have more power than Biden has. And I honestly think he just doesn't care. He's saying, you know what? We'll let the people in. We'll let them in. I got hairy legs. He just wants to let people in and hope for the best, because he's thinking, look, I'm almost out of here. Let them in. We'll have new voters. We'll have more people in our Democrat districts The apportionment will be different because now we'll have more people in the district, and it's a win for everybody. You know, I don't think he ideologically supports this idea because he spent a good amount of his career, railing against illegal immigration, just like Barack Obama did, just like many of them did, until they changed. So that's the part of me that makes me consider the fact that he might be leveraged. The cartels have a lot of money, and they're able to do things in a lot of different ways. And again, cartels aren't necessarily known for being shrewd negotiators. They're known for being extortionists and murderers. So I could see, you know, their leverage could be a threat. I don't know all of it. I do know you're right. I think he's complicit in it. I believe that Joe Biden is running the biggest human smuggling operation we've ever seen, and it's happening right here in the United States at our southern border. And that has to stop. He's literally in charge. He's the conductor of the Underground Railroad that now brings in child slaves for labor, cheap labor, adults, women, you name it. They're bringing everybody in addition to drugs. And it's so unfortunate, but it literally is where we are. And I feel badly about it because I feel like just nobody cares. I feel like people are starting to care. When I say people, I don't mean the millions of you that are listening. You guys are always sharp and have your finger on the pulse. But I'm talking about people who don't care about politics or the news. Where, you know, yesterday the big talk of the town, or Tuesday, was, it was Wednesday, yeah, right? It was yesterday that Matt Gaetz filed a motion on Tuesday, or was it Monday? Either way, whatever day it was, there was still, that was the big news of the day, and yet people were just like, yeah, whatever, you know, this historic thing of ousting a speaker, and there were so those people that are just uninformed and uninterested, they don't care enough about this issue. And some of them are starting to care, saying, man, you know, it's out of control. And I see people changing their positions slowly, but it's got to get so bad for people to be like, you know what, I'm a Democrat, I'm a liberal, but I don't want this. And I just had a situation like that. A friend of mine who I've argued at the top of my lungs, listen, you don't want a gun, don't get a gun. You don't want to carry a gun, don't carry a gun. But let people who want to own one and carry one, let them do what they've got to do. That's their right. And he was like, no, because no, you should have a course, you should have this, you should have that, you shouldn't, nobody, you lose your temper and you start doing things. And then he tells me he went to Pennsylvania for the weekend, and that somebody started, he had a road rage incident with somebody who was, you know, being belligerent and aggressive with him. And I'm going to tell you the story on the way back. And again, if you want to join the conversation, feel free. We've got calls right now from Florida, New York, California, Vermont, and more. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Stick around. I'm going to tell you what my buddy, it's actually my buddy from the restaurant. We were just talking today over lunch, and you're not going to believe what he told me. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Well, Mr. Valdez, you have one of the greatest shows that radio's ever had.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
And I regret that it got to this point. Honestly, I gave a very serious speech on August 31st on the House floor, and I laid out the things that the Speaker had to do, and I stressed that it was within Kevin McCarthy's total control whether or not he would face a motion to vacate, because contrary to what you've heard from my critics, I wasn't making demands on Kevin McCarthy to compel some sort of action from Joe Biden or the Senate, some impossible task, right? It's not an impossible task for the House of Representatives to put up a balanced budget like he promised.
All right, that is Congressman Matt Gaetz on the program earlier saying that he regrets the way this turned out. And again, not that he doesn't regret what he did. He regrets that it had to come to this. And I have to agree. It's a regrettable situation, but it is where we are. And if you want to listen to the entirety of that interview tonight, we did it live at 10 o'clock with Congressman Matt Gaetz. Check it out at Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com. You can also subscribe to the podcast and check the little check to have notifications, automatic downloads. This way it's there for you whenever you want to listen to it. And you could listen to any episode that we do here at America at Night. Any interview you may have missed, you can check it out anytime on demand, absolutely free. Just go to Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com, and feel free to share it with a friend. Now, let's continue. I wanted to get your opinions on that and on the fentanyl and the cartels and all of this crazy, because I find it just insane that the cartels are in such control, not only of the border, but of the entire drug operation. And it should not be that way. You know, there's a war on drugs, right? So we should be, in effect, having a war. You know, we kill some of them, they shoot back. You know, we're not doing anything to stop this except exacerbate it by opening the border, actually physically opening the gates. And there's video of that, and I think they've even admitted as much that they've done that. And this is where people need to know what's going on, because ultimately people will change their opinions. As I told you, my friend, and this was more on the crime than on the immigration, he was already kind of turning on immigration when he was telling me he's Cuban, came from Cuba on a jet ski to Miami, or Key West rather, and he's telling me we have to stop bringing the Cubans in. And I said, well, why? That sounds racist, sir. And he said, no, it's not. He said, I came here to work, and I'm working, and I made a business for myself, and I'm doing what I got to do. He said, this is just like the Mariel boat lift back in the 80s, where they're sending the worst of the worst in Cuba, and they're sending them here. And I said, well, you know, when Trump said that, you guys got all angry, right? You and your liberal friends. And he turned to me and said, well, no, Trump said that the Mexicans were rapists. I'm telling you that these people are people from the street, people that were probably going to be incarcerated. And Cuba's just like, hey, do what you got to do. Now, this same individual, good friend of mine, tells me he's in Pennsylvania over the weekend, and somebody's, honking, driving aggressively, flipping him the bird, and he's going at it with the guy. And while he's driving, his wife decides to call the cops. And she's like, oh, there's a guy. He's like trying to, cut us off, and he's not leaving us alone. And the husband was retaliating and being just as aggressive. And she says, no, the cops are telling us to pull over to the right lane and keep going and give him the mile marker. So as he pulls over to go into the right lane, as his wife is telling him to do because she's on the phone with the cops, he tells me, the guy thinks that I'm retreating from him, so now he's even more aggressive and chasing me. And he says, now the guy's throwing things at me. He had a bottle of water in his car. He throws it at my car. We're on the highway, and we're, right next to each other, driving at the same speed, and he's yelling, and he's got his hand out the window and all sorts of stuff. He said the guy was just livid with him. And he says, I have my wife and a family member that's visiting from Chile in the car. And they're going at it, and they're having this big ordeal. And he's like, I want to retaliate, but I have two women in the car with me, and I'm trying to work with his spouse and whatever. And ultimately, he says they keep going and they keep going, and he says, and that's when it occurred to me that my wife's on the phone calling the police. This man is here trying to run me off the road, throwing everything in his car at me, and the only thing I have to protect myself is a cell phone to call the police that are saying we're on our way. And he said, I'll tell you, at that moment, I realized I need a right to carry a gun with me. He said, if I had the gun with me, I said, well, again, you live in New Jersey and visiting in Pennsylvania. So according to the current gun laws, you'd be in some trouble, right? Because you'd have to have your gun in the glove box with your ammunition in the trunk. And good luck pulling over to the guy that's trying to run you off the road and kill you and saying, excuse me, sir, hold on. I'm going to load my gun, and then I'm going to try and defend myself. And I said, this is why concealed carry is absolutely necessary, because in a moment like that, this is what happens. Finally, the cops, he says he could see the cops through his rearview mirror. The guy sees the cops as well, goes into the fast lane, and the shoulder on the left side of the road disappears. The cops pull over to talk to him about what happened, and the bad guy gets away. And the cop reassured him that they had already gotten the plate, and there's cameras everywhere, and they have other cops on the road, and that they're going to catch him a little bit further up ahead. But it was just so interesting. Somebody that was so adamant about not having a gun ever and that nobody should have one went to say, no, I not only should have one, I should have been able to have it on me and loaded, because in a moment like that, my life could have been in danger, that and my family. And I thought, wow, this is what it has to get to. People have to individually experience the detriment of leftist policies in order to understand that our rights are absolute. It's just fascinating. Anyway, I want to get back to your calls. Let's go to Margaret calling from Burlington, Vermont, WVMT. Go right ahead.
Hi, Rick. Thanks for taking me. The woman from Michigan, and all of this business about deporting people and how we wouldn't be able to handle that. Well, I think we've got much bigger problems than that, and much bigger problems than the drugs. And I'd like to quote the report I read from Michigan. Gangs from Central and South America are targeting luxury homes, said Sheriff Michael Bouchard of Oakland County, Michigan. It's a very affluent part of Michigan. I grew up there. I've been in Vermont for decades now, but I know Michigan, and boy, I'll tell you, Rick, those other things where those masked people run into the stores and steal things, I kept thinking those are American citizens, but this report from this sheriff in Oakland County makes me wonder.
Margaret, what's interesting about that is I wouldn't be surprised if there are some illegal aliens that are involved in that. But I do think for the most part they are American citizens, just based on the video footage I'm seeing. But it doesn't mean that there aren't gangs out there. And this has always been a problem, right? There's always been like MS-13 and the 8th Street or 8th Avenue, whatever the name of that gang is. Forgive me for getting their name wrong. But there's a bunch of gangs that are in and out of jail. And they do these things, and it's organized crime. That's how gangs survive. They sell drugs, they do extortion, they do robberies, they do all sorts of things. And now that they also know that they can get away with murder, they're going to do it. And this is part of the problem that we have. Again, it's the same thing. It's these leftist policies that embolden people. And listen, I'm also emboldened. I can't lie, right? I try to be the most civil person I can be, and I am one for the most part. However, when I go out somewhere, especially in New York City, the first thing that goes through my head is, whatever happens to me, I'm doing whatever I've got to do. Because the reality of a cop showing up or getting something done is slim. They don't selectively apply the law. They did in the case of Daniel Penny, but that was because it was caught on video and the guy died. But if you're somewhere in New York City and somebody's, in your face. We saw a video the other day. You didn't see it, but I talked about the story on the air of this left-wing activist. I forget his name. I think his name was Ryan Carson. He left a wedding with his girlfriend. He's sitting on a bench for a second. Maybe they had a little bit to drink. They wanted to get a breath of fresh air. They're walking. A guy passes by. They get into some sort of altercation. They start talking. They're discussing something. He's like, get out of here, like motioning his hand to leave. The guy smacks him in the face or cuts his neck, one or the other. You can't really tell because the video is grainy. And then they cut out the part, I guess, where the rest of the attack happens. But he gets stabbed to death right in front of his girlfriend. And, last night we had a guest on, Dr. Vince Callahan, and he explained these responses that we have. Fight, flight, or freeze. And she froze. And my thought was that she was in shock. But she literally had a cell phone in her hand and didn't seem to call anybody. She was frozen in fear. And I think this is what people are going through. And it's incredibly traumatic for the people that are involved, the people that are in the stores, the people that are getting robbed on the streets. There are videos now on TikTok teaching people how to do this organized stealing, this shoplifting. It's a robbery. And in my opinion, it's all orchestrated, not just by the gangs that are going in there and these flash mobs that are going into places and looting them, but it's organized when you have law enforcement told to stand down, told that we're going to have no cash bail in X, Y, and Z city in America or in New York, in all of New York State. We're just not going to do it. We're not going to prosecute. When you have pro-crime, progressive prosecutors that coddle criminals saying, look, if you're not killing people, we're not doing it. We're not going to prosecute these crimes of aggravated assault or even attempted murder in New York City. They let you ride out with no cash bail. This is crazy. So murder, they'll keep you on. Attempted murder, they won't. It's so sick what's going on right now. And you're right. You've got these gangs. Many of them are illegal aliens and whatnot in certain parts of the country, and they're doing what they do. People are there's a gang. There was a Chinese gang. There's another gang that are making their rounds around the country, stealing catalytic converters off of every car they could find. People are waking up in their neighborhood, and their cars just are like, they're super loud because they're cutting the muffler, the tailpipe, and they're taking these catalytic converters. There's so much crime going on, and lamentably, we're not doing enough to stop it. And I think people will eventually figure it out, just like my buddy did with his road rage incident in Pennsylvania. Anyway, Margaret, thank you for the call. I appreciate it. Folks, there's more to come straight ahead. Your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, to the phones we go, getting your opinions on all the hot topics this evening. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Let us go to Todd, Atlanta, Georgia, WGKA. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, great show tonight. I was calling about the cartels, and, Bidenomics has been great for them, hasn't it?
Oh, God, yeah.
The cartels are like contractors, and they are accomplishing the agendas of not only the Chinese Communist Party, but also globalists like George Soros and Klaus Schwab. And they're accomplishing the political objectives of Biden and the Democrats. And, the communists flooded this country with heroin, they flooded it with cocaine. They've used
Todd, you're fading in and out. Let's see if we can get your phone fixed because you're making some good points, but I can barely hear you. I want to continue with Patrick in Oxnard, California, KVTA. Patrick, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Rich. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
I want to say a couple things if I can. One, longtime Jim Bohannon listener, and can't say enough about Jim. Want to let you know. Yes. And you, to me, have done an awesome job.
Thank you.
You're bringing your experience in along with a macro and patient articulation, which is really great. You were a little bit soft when you were getting comfortable, but I think you're pretty comfortable in your seat now, and it's enjoyable to listen to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And also, I appreciate your haircut because it's not a nuisance style.
I do appreciate that. I guess some of us go to the same barber. And what's on your mind tonight, Patrick?
Hey, first I need to say I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I've been to more than one rodeo. I'm a Reagan guy. I've followed politics since I was very young. And the subject I want to bring up is the materials for the wall. Now, when I first heard about those and being scrapped, I thought, well, Trump being the businessman he is, he should pick those up and either use them in his administration and pick up a penny or two. I know he wouldn't want to make much, but he's got his hands kind of full, so I understand that. But what I'm really curious about now is we hear about the materials being sold, and now all of a sudden the wall is going to be built again. I'm wondering where the materials went and if we can trace that, because with Biden, when you follow the money, that's his priority.
And we know that he's done some other things. And it's just more than a coincidence. They say there are no coincidences. I realize that we can't have government investigate it, but I know that there's going to be some security firms and investigation firms that are, sorry about the background, that are post-military, and a number of other ones that I would sure like to see that investigated and find out and follow the money, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Listen, I agree with you on that one, Patrick. And part of what I think is happening is I don't think it's the same exact section of border wall. If I'm wrong on that, then I'm wrong. But I believe that this is a different section that they're building the wall at that was scheduled to be built, and it's going to be built. The construction that they had halted at the other place, I believe, was where the materials went bad and they started rusting or whatever the case was, and they scrapped those. So part of me wants to think that Biden's telling the truth, that they're forcing him to do it, but I really just don't believe it. I think Biden can figure out a way out of a lot of things when you're president of the United States, not the least of which is being forced to build a wall you didn't want to build. My contention here is that Biden really wants to control the sections of the border that the cartel is indicating they need controlled, so that they can put this wall up here and make sure we're driving traffic this way. It's easier for us to bring people across, and that's it. Or we need you to put those roads in here and whatever and put the wall there, but put a door in the wall so it's easier for us to bring people in. Either way, it sounds like a losing situation if Biden's the one that's in charge. Those are my thoughts. Patrick, thank you for the call from California on KVTA. Excellent station. Folks, we come back to the speed round, your calls, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, to the phones we go. It's the speed round. Let's check in with Jane calling from New York on WGDJ. Jane, go right ahead.
Hey, Rich. Okay, you're right about my friends in Long Island can't go 10 miles from their house without running into MS-13. But terrible. My main concern, they're not doing ballot harvesting. They're doing voter harvesting. How do we take into account and regulate and fix the number of voters they are adding that will slant our votes when we go to vote? How do they regulate that? Because I'm kicking and screaming at my town hall.
And you should be. You should be kicking and screaming. Again, I think ultimately this boils down to us having these controls in place and not allowing people like Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania to just automatically register every last person that gets a driver's license. To me, this is an open invitation for massive fraud, because we've got to make sure, again, and I don't even know the rules. Maybe that's a little research I need to do, finding out what is it that we need to do to get a license. In New Jersey, you do have to prove where you're from. But are we doing that across the board? Who knows? Anyway, thanks, Jane. Take care. Good night. God bless. I'm Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere, because we're coming back tomorrow.